Hello, people of the internet. It is Eclipse, and welcome to Melting Skies, Chapter 7. If you guys enjoy this one, let me know in the comments, or if you think there's things that I can do better, also let me know down in the comments. Without further ado, let's dive on in. Minnow woke up with the sound of a slightly angered howl coming from Alpha's den. Those who weren't already awake woke up and started to file into the clearing. Minnow did the same, but tried to stay with the crowd, until Alpha called again.
Minnow!
The crowd went silent at that, and Minnow took shaky steps forward as the wolves around her made a path for her.
Minnow, you have failed your hunters and warriors assessments, and have enjoyed the spoils of our pack without properly contributing.
Minnow's head started to feel heavy as Alpha's voice sounded just in front of her, booming and making the inner mechanisms of her ears shake. She pinned her ears to her head in an attempt to silence her Alpha's harsh voice.
After a whole year of debate on this topic, I've come up with a solution.
Minnow sighed and closed her eyes as Alpha continued, wishing that she could just disappear. She knew what was coming.
You will be a queen, supplying our pack with new hunters and warriors as winter takes our injured, sick, and elderly away.
Alpha huffed and walked around her, each paw carefully placed.
You will begin your duties at the start of Moonlight's High tonight.
No. Minnow sat where she was and kept her eyes shut. Not like she could see Alpha or the pack anyhow, but having her eyes closed felt comforting in the spotlight of fire as the packmate's glares burned into her like a branding iron.
You dare interrupt your alpha? What do you mean, no?
As the infuriated wolf circled her faster, snarling and nipping a bug's length away from the edges of her fur. Minnow didn't physically react, but she couldn't help but feel saddened. She had almost forgotten who Alpha was, what his name was, all the good memories she had of him, how he and Harsha comforted her as a puppy together, how he had tried to treat her the same as any other trainee, still trying to get her a mentor on the day of her ceremony, and stood with her so she wasn't completely alone, facing a whole pack of wolves who wanted nothing to do with her. Her relationship with Oni used to be so much more. What happened to him? He used to be a lot gentler, not just with her, but others in the pack as well, even those who challenged his authority. What changed in him to make him so tight all the time? Even now, as he demanded an answer from her, his paw steps landing in seemingly delicate circles were more pushed into the ground than usual. Almost like his skin was tighter on his body, or his body was as heavy as a mountain. As she listened beyond his berating, she could hear his muscles contracting against one another in a discordant way, shoulders pressed against his neck, his ears back, his legs tensed, his tail straight out as if being used for measurement. She sighed and spoke again as Oni was mid-reprimand. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Oni." The Alpha paused at that, as she could feel his eyes staring her down, burning, once again burning all around her. Everyone was looking, everyone was thinking. I will not be a breeder. I would rather die. Kill me here if there are truly no other options. I've asked to be tested again. I've learned more since Noxima's pathetic attempt at teaching me.
Hey!
She heard her biohazard snarl a short distance away.
It's true, deal with it.
Minnow snarled right back over her shoulder. There's more than I can give to this pack. I have value beyond what my female body can produce, but no one here has ever given me a fair chance at it. Not my mother, or my brother, or even you, Oni. And the only one who I thought would give me a fair chance at deciding my own life just wanted to mate with me. The crowd was dead silent as the fire crackled on.
Okay, that's enough!
Alpha shouted over no noise.
If you will not bring this pack, puppies, I will have to exile you.
His voice grew fainter as he walked back toward the overhang overlooking the camp.
Minnow, from this day on, this is no longer your home. You are to leave the territory at once. If you return, you will be treated as an intruder. Do you understand?
Minnow opened her mouth to speak, but shook as another voice rang out from the same direction.
No! Alpha, no!
It was Rygian.
Please don't make her leave. She could be of use still.
I'm sorry, Rygian. I've thought of everything, but she's failed in every aspect.
Minnow gritted her teeth at that before opening her nearly locked jaw. Except for just, test my abilities again like I've been asking. She lowered her head as her hackles rose. You've gotten too stubborn for your own good, Oni. The pack rippled with gasps and whimpers as Oni howled in anger.
I am Alpha to you, Minnow.
No, you're not. I'm not a part of your pack anymore, right? That means nobody's my Alpha. I'm no one to you. All of you. Whatever bad omen you all might have thought I was. You brought it upon yourselves. You all can go to hell. Minnow stood up and started to exit, but a familiar scent blocked her path.
Please, Minnow. Reconsider.
Minnow pushed past Rygian as she made her way through the crowd. It's too late for that, Rygian. Her trot became a run as she reached the edge of camp, and continued to be a run as she charged forward on the path she knew, growing closer and closer to the border. She felt nothing. She stormed past her favorite sunbathing spots, areas where she knew mice holes were, and her favorite rock that had a strange texture but only on one side of it. She was saying goodbye to all of these things, forever. She dashed past the border and abruptly stopped. The ground under her paws was rough. She was at the cliff face. From the texture and slant, she could tell the ground disappeared not far off from where she was. A tentative check with her paws proved her correct. After a couple of steps, the ground dropped off suddenly. A cliff? Ravine? Mountain? River? It was hard for her to tell. She just knew she had to get around it somehow. Her gut told her to move to the right, and so she did, walking upwards on a winding path as a mixture of grass, rock, and mud slid around under her paws. However, she felt she was going in the wrong direction. The faint calls of her name, the scent that had pulled her in a foreign direction before. She was heading in the opposite direction. However, she was heading up. It would be easier for her to smell her surroundings at a higher altitude, but it was also more dangerous. If she wasn't careful, she could fall off and what? Die? Finally? Was she supposed to tell everyone off and die? No, she needed to do something else before then. She just didn't know what. As she trekked upwards, she thought about those times in her life, the times she could see, the times she knew what had to be done instead of what had happened. It only seemed to happen when she died, and she wasn't supposed to. As she got older, the likeliness of it happening got less. She had more eyes on her. Other packmates were with her all the time. If Rygian hadn't given her food in the winter, would she have actually died? Or would she had been stuck in a loop, unable to fully die, but without the energy needed to change her path? She shivered at the thought. Rygian. The thought of him filled her with so much sadness and so much disgust. How had Lavari raised such an entitled leech? She didn't even know what he looked like. just knew his fur was soft and his body and voice were gentle and lively. At least, they were. Now, whenever she thought of him, all she could see was an amalgamation of wolf and soul snare. Her species, but with the same soul-sucking power and tricks as the first thing she had ever seen. She turned as the wind guided her. There it was. That sweet smell of something amazing just waiting for her. She started trotting faster, walking up and over a hill toward the smell, entering a large field as the smell became more intense. It was clear the field was large from the wind and the scents being swept around it, like the cradle of a mother wolf's tail. So she started running, panting happily and feeling the world fly by around her. From the wind and dip of the valley, she could tell she was heading towards something big, maybe a mountain. Luckily for her, there were no other scents of wolves or other predatory animals. What would she do in summer and winter when the soul snares emerged? She would have to find and secure a safe shelter for herself. The only thing she feared now was getting stuck in a loop. She wasn't afraid to die, and she wasn't afraid to live. The more she thought about it, the more excited she got. She didn't have to worry about the burning gazes or the freezing silence of her pack. She was truly free. As she ran upwards again, her paws touching all types of new textures and objects, like meeting new friends as she was guided up what she now knew was a mountain. A massive one, with several segments to it, and a stream running through the middle, that she could hear welcoming her in. She took a much-needed drink and rested as her tail wagged. Her stomach vibrated with need as she groaned. Time for food now. She kept following the sweet scent further up as the sound of the stream faded. Her paws suddenly touched near perfectly flat rock as the air seemed to decompress around her. She was on a mountaintop, but from the lack of wind, she could tell this was the shortest segment of the mountain. The perfectly smooth, flat mountaintop under her was amazing. She laid down flat on it and felt the sun bathe her pelt in warmth. She would have to remember this spot, or even try to find a way to nest on this thing. She sniffed around and wandered as she found the edge of rock that gave way to the sheer cliff face. She could smell different vegetation from what she knew was far away. The wind carried all kinds of smells to her as she sat on the edge, taking it all in. She could only imagine what it looked like. All of her friends of the colors sat upon a distant horizon. Her body relaxed as she leaned on another rock face behind her. As she turned her head, she suddenly smelled something a little muskier. She walked toward it and stumbled as she found a kind of overhang. Moss hanging under it, a cave. It was small, but more than big enough for her. She made her arrangements, spreading her scent and fully familiarizing herself with the cave, which was more like a burrow. It muffled the noise from outside, but kept it loud enough for Minnow to still be aware while sleeping and eating inside of it. It's almost like it had been waiting for her to find it. But there was one more thing left. She padded confidently toward the heart of the mountain where she could hear the stream at its strongest. When she got to the start of the stream, the scent she had smelled from so far away was now so pungent it's like it was screaming at her to explore it. She sniffed at the rock face, no doubt a base for another part of the mountain. She felt a small opening in the rock where the stream started. The water was so cold and almost magically refreshing to drink, straight from the heart of the mountain. She sniffed directly above it, and there it was. It was some kind of sweet round thing, almost like a berry. It was growing off of a plant attached to the steep rock. There were a lot of them. She tentatively took a bite of what she knew was too big to be a berry but too sweet to be an herb, and nearly cried at the taste. The big ball exploded in her maw as soon as she bit down, flooding her mouth with juice and thick but mushy material that her teeth made quick work of. After swallowing the contents of only one of these things, she already felt full. She knew that this definitely wouldn't supplement her whole diet, but it would be a crutch for when she couldn't find prey. She had already sniffed out several mice holes on her way up. She quickly grabbed another one of these sweet balls of nutrients and carried it, along with some grass from the mountainside, back to her cave to make a nest and start her own personal meal pile. This was beautiful. This was perfect. She could make a life for herself here, her little mountain. She would have to name it, right? She sighed happily as she brainstormed ideas while sunbathing. After a while of melting into the mountaintop outside her den, she sat up and spoke softly. Home mountain. It's a little silly, but I think it suits it. Home mountain. Heart River runs down the center of it, starting at the base, where heart herbs grow. She giggled and laid back down, never feeling prouder or more peaceful. The now lone wolf kept adding to her den and slowly exploring the rest of the mountain as several days passed. She always made sure to turn around and start heading back toward her cave when the wind turned a certain direction, usually signaling it wasn't long from nightfall. She had slowly been exploring what she was certain was the second tallest mountain spire on the other side of the stream. She was curious and excited to see if that mountaintop was also flat like hers. It was just her and the mountain. She felt so loved by it. As she trotted along, tail wagging, she suddenly heard paw steps? Yes, they were distinctively paw steps, approaching her. Fast. She tried to turn, but it was too late. She was pinned as the scent that was downwind from her previously flooded her nose. It was fierce, but also weathered and musky. This was not a wolf from her pack. No, this wolf wasn't from any pack. She paused as she tried to take in what currently had her pinned like a leaf under a rock. The other wolf was also pausing, panting slightly from the charge and takedown. Whoa. I'm sorry. The other wolf suddenly got off of her. I thought you were one of those black, creepy things with the glowing faces. Who the hell are you? The blind one sat up to address the she-wolf in front of her. The wolf was eyeing her, she could tell from the warmth on her pelt, but her gaze didn't burn. There was no judgment, only wonder. She stopped herself for a moment. Who was she? Minnow? No, that wasn't the right name anymore, was it? That name had been given out of spite from none other than Noxima, saying that she would never be able to catch anything more useful than the tiny fish it was named after. She carried it to honor her pack, but forget her pack. She needed a new name. Now. Monix. She practically purred with brimming pride. My name is Monix. So that was Melting Skies Chapter 7. Let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you on the other side.